The Fish of Lijiang is written by Chinese writer Chen Qifan and translated into English by Ken Liu. The story has won the 2012 Science Fiction and Fantasy Translation Award of Short Story. The story started with the protagonist's dream. He saw two fists right in front of him, and he had to guess where the chocolate was. The protagonist was in a trip to Lijiang to recuperate. According to the report of his body check, he suffered from PNFD2. He was not willing to leave the company, but his boss insisted on his decision. When he arrived at Lijiang, he found that many things have already changed. Lijiang was no longer the city that possessed natural beauty. Living in a slow pace did improve the health of the protagonist. Nonetheless, he had doubts over the way of recuperation. The protagonist came across a beautiful girl. They hanged out together. Gradually, he fell in love with her. They had a lot of conversation, but the protagonist felt confused about the background of her. Even though he was quite afraid of her, they had sex eventually. After having sex, she unveiled the truth. It was planned for them to meet each other. The lady was a nurse who worked for the tycoon and authorities in a time-dilated room. Those people were having a time-sense dilation therapy. It helped extend their lifespan. As she had to stay in the room, she was under the effect of time dilation. For the protagonist, he was the experimental subject of another technology, time compression. This technology has affected the protagonist's concept about time. Therefore, he always worked overtime and felt exhausted. In order to heal both of them, the authority planned for them to meet each other. When they lived together, the effects of time compression and time dilation were cancelled out. That's why it is called as therapy. The protagonist was very depressed after knowing the truth. He went to watch the fish in Lijiang so as to relieve himself. What made him even more depressed was that those fish were not real. They were just some kind of 3D projection. At the end of the story, he found that his fate was determined, and there was not much choice for him to make in his life. About human nature, the author has made use of quite a lot of psychoanalysis in the story. For evidence, he has described the protagonist's desire to have sex with women, which is the it of him. He also mentioned something about the superego of the protagonist. In the story, he criticized the secret use of time-condensed technology on workers. It somehow reveals the moral standard of the protagonist. In the very beginning and the end of the story, we can see the image of two fists. It is the unconscious dream of the protagonist. The reason why he always dreamed of this picture is because he found that there was actually no choice for him to make in his life. He was frustrated about this, and this concept keeps appearing in the form of dream. Determinism would be the core message of the story. He originally thought that he was able to control his own life. However, as the story moved on, we could find that he was not the master of his own life. All things in his life are planned by the authority. He had to work under the time-condensing environments. He was forced to leave his position in the company and went to recuperate. He met a woman that he loved and found that it was designed for them to meet. The protagonist had very limited choice in his life. This story expressed some kind of anger to destiny. We are not responsible for the occurrence of different events in our life. About human relation, in the story, the protagonist has played a few roles in the society according to the 7 ages of man theory. He was hovering between the stage of lover and soldier. He worked for the company and had a quite stable life. Also, he was in an intimate relationship with the nurse. That's why we may deduce that he was at the age of lover and soldiers. For the rank of protagonist, he does not belong to any special organization, therefore rank is not applicable in this story. Furthermore, the story puts stress on interaction between the protagonist and his girlfriend. Therefore, not much good behavior was described in the story. In the second chapter, we can see that the relationship between the protagonist and his colleagues were not good. They were in a kind of competition. When he was forced to take the vacation they were so happy and hoped that he could not come back. The hostile atmosphere should be triggered by limited resources. Everyone wanted to be promoted to a higher level, but only a few people can have the chance. This led to the intra-group competition. The relationship between the protagonist and the nurse was the focus of the story. They met each other for a short time but had sex. For the protagonist, he perceived the relationship as lovers. Meanwhile, the nurse clearly knew that it was a treatment only. The difference between their perception about the relationship led to the little conflicts between them. Finally, when the protagonist knew the truth, he felt so frustrated, and the nurse decided to leave him without telling him. That's why they are so unhappy at the end of the story. For human development, the author had a specific view about what a good life is. The protagonist should be a half cynics and a half stoics. Throughout the whole story, we can see that he hated the change of Lijiang. He loved the natural Lijiang rather than the artificial Lijiang. This shows that he is a cynic. On the other hand, he was eager to have freedom in his life. This part shows that he was a stoic. About modernism, the author applies two ideas in the story. They are Rousseau's idea and Hume's idea respectively. Rousseau's ideas point out that people should own the rights to control the government. In the story, things go opposite. The government is allowed to apply the condensed technology on normal citizens without informing them. Obviously, the author is opposed to that. The protagonist wanted his own life back without being controlled. Other than that, the relationship between he and the nurse has revealed some of the characteristics of Hume's idea about desire and reason. The protagonist knew that there was something wrong with the girl, but he had sex with her. That's exactly the same as Hume's idea that desire controls human behavior rather than reason. The story is a soft science story. The reason behind is that science is not the main focus of the story. It is only a clue to have the story proceed. It makes use of the basic 3-act structure. The first part is that the protagonist is forced to recuperate and went to Lijiang. The second part is the fortuitous meeting of the protagonist and the nurse. The last part is the part that unveiling the truth. It uses the first-person narrator to describe the story. All the incidents happen right in front of the protagonist, and it is really suitable because it can reflect the feeling of the protagonist who was confused and worried. If third-person narrator was used, the expression of emotion would not be so great. For the language and dialogue used, I'm afraid that this may be the worst part of the story. As the story was originally written in Chinese, many Chinese slangs and special terms are used. When they are translated in English, it is unavoidable that they are not as precise as the original one. The protagonist is an everyman. He had no specific personalities. He had a very boring and intense life. The work-life balance of him is completely skewed. He just likes one of the workaholic in Hong Kong. To conclude, he is not an appealing person, just like me and you. For the nurse, she is much more attractive than the protagonist. She has blended characteristics of eye candy and mind reader. The good-looking appearance and her mysterious background are really attractive to the readers. The time of the story is in near future, where technology is more advanced. The place setting is at the artificially modified Lijiang. For the technology, the authority has invented technologies like time dilation, time condensed, spirit transfer, and 3D projection. These technologies seldom appear in other stories. That's why readers may find them interesting. For literary style, it makes use of a lot of techniques wonderfully. To begin with, it uses the fish in Lijiang to symbolize the protagonist himself. All things are blended, including the motion of fish and the destiny of the protagonist. Secondly, it uses show don't tell in the first part of the story. Instead of using many words to describe the scene about how they met each other, the author simply portrayed the appearance and facial expression of the protagonist and the nurse to show that they are interested in each other and they will have meeting later. That's the end of my analysis and comment.